A brand new year is upon us, and I have an important question for you. Do you have a vision for what you want the next year to look like? What about the next 5 years? I'm not just talking about a vision board where you cut out photos of places you want to travel to and cars you want to drive. I'm talking about a vision for the kind of life you want to live. Well, our guest today happens to be an expert in exactly that. Carey Conley is a speaker and author, and she's known as the Vision Expert. She's now co-authored a book entitled Keep Looking Up, Transforming Grief into Hope After Tragedy. And she co-wrote this with her daughter, Laurel. So I have the pleasure of interviewing both of them today on the topic of vision. And together they are spreading a message of hope through adversity. And they're talking about why having a vision for life is everything. Welcome back to Powerhouse Women, the podcast. This is our very first episode of the new year and the new decade, which is kind of crazy to say. So I thought we would kick it off with a bang and something we haven't done before, which is our very first mother-daughter interview. So Carey and Laurel, I'm just so thrilled to have you both here.
Thanks for having us. It's fun.
Thanks. We're excited.
I know, it's kind of like a little girls hangout that we'll just record for other people to benefit from. I think that's kind of the best way to do these.
I love it.
So I was excited to interview you both together. Carey and I met a few months ago, just earlier this year. Both live in Arizona. She does some incredible work, which I'm excited to have you share more about. And you were just finishing your book, which you and Laurel wrote together. So at the time of this recording, of course, the book is now out there, and I just finished reading it over the weekend, actually. So I wanted to start there with what inspired you to write this book, first and foremost, but then what inspired you to write it together? If you just want to start with that story, and then we're going to get into this really juicy topic, which is perfect to kick off the new year, and that is why it's important to have a vision. So I'll tee you up in that way and let Carey take it from there.
Great. So Laurel and I have been through quite a bit in the past 5 years. We've lost both my husband, her dad, and my son, her brother, to suicide. We lost Ross, my husband, in July of 2014. And then 3 years later, my son, which would be August of 2017. So after all of that and getting through a lot of stuff, we took a good year and a half to take some time off, regroup. Laurel actually got married a year later. And at the beginning of this year, 2019, or beginning of last year, I guess I should say 2019, we decided that we had learned so much through this journey of loss that we thought would help other people. So we wrote the book, Keep Looking Up, not only to share our story, mostly it's 11 chapters of things that Laurel and I feel most people don't know about other people when they're going through something traumatic. And we do split the chapters up where I share my perspective and then Laurel shares hers, because as you know, we have different ways of looking at it because of our ages, the relationships with both of these guys, and just our personalities. So that's the purpose of the book. And we decided right from the beginning, Laurel and I said, okay, we're going to get the book out, and we wanted it to launch on 11/11, which was my son's birthday. So we had a date and we reversed engineer it, which is one of the things I talk about in vision work.
Yeah. And the book is so valuable from that perspective. I think what I loved most about it was hearing both of your different perspectives and in many ways how different they were. So Laurel, why was this project so important to you and getting to create it with your mom and getting to share your side of this whole picture and the story, really the experience you've been through?
Yeah, so the biggest thing that we continually went back to when writing this book was making sure that it was relatable. That was another big piece of us sharing both of our perspectives, is that different people can relate to us in different ways. And it was so important that we were very vulnerable throughout the whole thing, because we both saw, firsthand when we were vulnerable with other people about what we had gone through. I think that it brings a lot of peace for other people. I think that we get very caught up in kind of hiding the stuff that happens to us. And so when we opened up and were vulnerable and relatable, when we had that with other people, that brought us peace. So we wanted to offer that in our book as well.
Which is that vulnerability piece, and really, I think even deeper, the authenticity, just sharing your true experiences, the ups and the downs, is a big pillar of the Powerhouse Women community. You had actually brought it up in the book, Laurel, about the impact of social media. And, within this entrepreneurial community, it's, I think, a big thing that does play with our ability to see how capable we are to take the next step on the big things we feel called to pursue. As we look around and we see what appears to be everyone else who has it all together, and then we look at the hot mess that is our life.
Right.
And it's very easy to make up a story that, well, who am I to do this work, or who am I to share this message? So what has been your personal experience with that? Do you want to just share a little bit more about your thoughts on that?
Yes, I think we really, really get stuck into a comparison cycle. I also started noticing that what you're missing in your life, or what you're struggling with, is what you start to see other people doing better at or having that you don't have. So especially when I first lost my dad, it was like I was seeing everybody with their dad. And then when I lost my brother, it was like, oh, it's National Sibling Day. I didn't even know that was a thing. It was just that those things started to become a lot more prominent. And I think, taking that back to the business side of stuff too, if you see people doing exactly what you're wanting to do, but they're doing it so much better and faster, it just highlights what you're lacking in your life. It's like it's projecting it onto you. And so I have to be very mindful, because I do think a lot of good things can come from social media, especially us being able to push this book out in our story. It makes it happen faster. It's just being way more mindful about getting stuck into that cycle. And so when you are looking at it, trying to remember that this is just people's highlight reel that they're putting out there, that everybody has their stuff.
Yeah.
It's so true. And Carey, I know you utilize this beautiful platform called social media quite a bit in your work and building your business. And I think, Laurel, you hit the nail on the head when you said, it's this ability, like, what a time to live in, where we can share a message on this platform called the internet that I don't think is going anywhere anytime soon, and have the ability to reach people halfway across the world. So it's got so many blessings to it. But on the flip side, there is that tendency to compare, to fall into imposter syndrome. So, Carey, how do you work with entrepreneurs to combat this? Because I think it's a big reason why people don't move forward in creating the things they want to create.
Yeah, so I do end up speaking and coaching a lot of entrepreneurs of all ages. And one of the things that I talk about is that it is a very powerful tool, like anything else, that can be used for good or not so good. The unfortunate thing is that most people don't realize that when they're posting things, they're not doing it intentionally to hurt anybody or to make them feel like they're better. It's just not knowing what, they just don't know what they don't know. So a young entrepreneur, a new entrepreneur will use social media not understanding how it really works.
Right.
So for example, Facebook is one animal, Instagram a whole other one. They have two completely different purposes with different, all different things. And so when you learn how to use it, let's use Facebook, for example, of how to get on there the right way with the right motivation, it works beautifully. But you have to know what you're doing, and most of us really don't. So one of the biggest key advice that I give to people is, if you're using social media to build your brand, which you should, you have to hire somebody who really knows what they're doing, or else it can really backfire.
Yeah. Oh, girl. I'm like, this could be an entire rabbit hole that we go down about hiring people who are geniuses at things that you suck at.
Yes, so, I talk a lot about that.
We'll save that for another day. And but I actually love that we really kind of touched on this topic, because I think that when I look back at the times of my life where I was lacking a vision. I was lacking that clear picture of where I was going. I was so much more susceptible to fall into the trap of looking at what everyone else was doing.
Correct. Yeah.
So do you find that the lack of vision, I'm not going to put the words in your mouth. Here's what I want to ask. What do you find that the lack of vision does to people? And I'll actually have you both answer this. I think what's so cool about your book is hearing the two different perspectives. So we'll throw it to Carey first, but then I would actually love to hear Laurel's perspective on this too. Just what does a lack of having a vision just in someone's life do to them or for them in terms of psychological impact, motivation, inspiration? What have you seen in your work, Carey?
So I've been teaching, I'm known as a vision expert, and I've been teaching people how to get a vision written, leap off the page, crystal clear, out of your head, on paper. Because what most people have is what I call a very wishy-washy hope and a wish and a prayer plan going on. And especially entrepreneurs who have it just kind of up there, they aren't able, number one, to put a metrics-based business plan on paper. So they have lovely vision boards of things that they are wanting to achieve, but they have no dates on when they're going to achieve them. And that is probably one of the key things that I do differently from everybody else that talks about vision and all of that, is that I get people to give timelines to everything that they are shooting to reach for. Because you can't reverse engineer and make a business plan without having dates that you're shooting to achieve stuff, right? So it fixes that. The other thing it helps with, and this is a big epidemic going on right now, is it helps you stay focused. It helps you stay consistent. And it definitely helps you stay self-motivated. I've had a really crystal clear vision for my life in both my businesses that I started over 26 years ago. And because I've been so clear on the vision, I've been able to keep going no matter what. I've been very consistent. That's, I think, a huge problem. And maybe Laurel can expand on that, especially with her age group, of not having a vision and knowing where they're going specifically 3 to 5 years out.
I would love to hear that from Laurel's perspective. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely think that's a huge issue. You know, the biggest thing that I think happens when there is a lack of vision is not knowing what they're working towards, or also what kind of lifestyle they want to live. I think that's a really, really big thing that people forget, is that you can create a lifestyle among your work. I think we're very much taught to leave college, get this 9 to 5, and have this same schedule as every single person, which works for some people and doesn't work for others. And I think that's a big piece of that vision that's lacking too, is what kind of lifestyle are you wanting to create, and what do you need to do to get there? That goes back to what my mom was saying about that consistency, is that's creating that lifestyle and that long-term goal. I know a lot of people my age get stuck very much in kind of just the day-to-day mentality of not thinking about why they're staying at that job. You know, what is it that they're working towards, kind of what that end goal is for their life. It's very much, it's good to be present to an extent, you know, to enjoy where you're at, but also knowing what you're working towards. And that's lacking big time.
Yeah.
And I think you both touched on in different ways this concept that it took me until I was in my first big girl job out of college. And it was the first time in my life where I ever asked myself the question, what would I love to do? And Carey, you brought up this great point in the book about how as a society, we're kind of, depending on where we grow up and what the environment of that upbringing is, there's a big conversation just about fitting other people's expectations or the way the path should look. And not even from, I don't even think this is often coming from a place that is anything but these people in our lives feeling like they really are doing their best to guide us.
Yes.
But ultimately, it doesn't actually have the child or the young person ask, what am I really great at? What inspires me? What do I feel like I'm put on this earth to do? Will you share a little bit of just what you've seen in your line of work, like the impact of that, and what your commitment is to start to change that earlier than I think a lot of people start to realize that they have a say?
Yeah, this is my big long-term legacy that I want to work on is that
Mm-hmm.
we still have a culture right now that takes a little human, that going into school they're pretty authentic. They know who they are. They know what they love. They're pretty happy with themselves. But unfortunately, what we do is we pull them through a system that doesn't necessarily cultivate their authentic self. As a matter of fact, I think in most cases, it does the exact opposite thing. I think for a lot of them, it strips them of who they really are. Because it's still very much an organization, a structure built on, we want you to come out and be able to achieve. We want you to be able to make money. We want you to be able to get all the titles. It's all about rewards. And so what's happening is so many of them are coming out of college following a system and being told, through the education, through parenting, through everything, that this is the path you should go on. And unfortunately, what I'm seeing is most of them 6 months out into their big girl jobs, or a year later, or maybe even 2 years later, are very unhappy. They're in situations where they don't like what they do. They don't really love, like I said, like Laurel mentioned, they don't really love the lifestyle of the 9 to 5, which was definitely my case. And they don't know how to change it. And that's the big problem. They don't know that they can actually sit down and think for themselves around, what do I want? This is what happened with me when I was 26, is that I was following that 9 to 5 gig and wasn't happy. And I literally had to sit down and write my first vision statement on paper, which I still have, of everything I really wanted.
Yeah.
And that's the big thing that I'm on that mission right now, to teach people at a much younger age that you can create whatever it is you want. You just have to open up your mind to it and start collaborating with the universe.
What was it for you at 26 that even gave you the thought that you should do that and write down that vision?
So, this was the 80s, Lindsay. So everybody in the 80s
We're not putting timestamps on anything.
Which we did in the 1980s is you went to college, you got a good degree, you got married, and you got on the track. And everybody in our tribe was on the track, including my husband, and he was very successful in corporate sales. He did well there. I got into it and changed jobs about every 2 years because I just didn't fit the mold. And I was very blessed to have a woman come into my life at one of those jobs that became my first mentor. That was the first one ever to say to me, you can create whatever you want to create. You've just got to get really clear on what that is.
Yeah.
And so what I did and what I now do, and I have done with thousands of people, is I wrote out in every aspect of my life what I wanted it to look like. My relationship with my husband, where we were living, what our lifestyle looked like. We didn't have Cole and Laurel yet, but I knew that I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom and be able to raise them. But I also want to be able to make a really good residual income while I was doing that.
Yeah.
So that showed up in my life when I was pregnant with Laurel and stepped into a network marketing in Arbonne. And so I just got really clear. And what I know when I help people get clear is that they now can see it coming and the ripple effect begins, and they can start making better choices like Laurel's now doing because of the lifestyle that she wants.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's very powerful.
Which I can only imagine, being raised by someone who learned this in her youth. Was your mom able to pass that on to you? Was this a conversation as you grew up, this just awareness that you could actually design that, Laurel?
Yeah, I think one thing that was great about having my mom always instilling that in us is that she always reminds me and my husband too that we always have choices. That you are not ever stuck anywhere if this is not what you're wanting. You always have a choice to change it. And I think that is very important because I know a lot of people don't grow up with that mindset. Like my mom said, their parents are on that track, and, nothing to say that there's anything wrong with that when it works for people, but for people that are wanting more, I think it would be huge for someone to just tell them that you have choices, you can make changes, you can go after whatever it is that you're wanting to do. So that has helped me immensely after college. I did go right into my first sales job and it was not what I wanted. So I made different choices and continually do that to make sure that I'm always leading towards the lifestyle that I'm wanting to have and in what those end goals are. So,
yeah. Oh, wow. And just, I mean, I think the seed of that is just waking up to that realization that you have a say. Like you said, you have choices.
Right.
And so for those who are listening, I want to get into some practical, tangible things that people can implement now. As we're already into a new year. It's here, it's upon us. So let's say someone listening is just new to this conversation. They found this podcast because they are in a place where they say, you know what, I feel like there's more for me. I don't know if that's a business. I don't know if it's just a passion project. It's a career change. Carey, where do you start this vision conversation for someone who is just opening their mind to the fact that they have a choice and they realize that maybe the path that they're on isn't the one they want to stay on?
Right. So this is the curriculum that I've created, and I've walked, like I said, thousands of people through it, is to actually, first and foremost, you've got to sit in a really quiet space. So that means you have to block off some time, at least half a day, to sit very quietly and be able to really listen to your heart. And what I ask people to do is to, at the top of that piece of paper, to date it as if it's 3 years from today. And then right after the date, I ask them to write their age as on that day. How old will they be? And then I ask them to write the ages of any young people in their life, their kids, their grandkids, nieces, nephews, anybody they're really involved in. And then after that, the ages of anybody older in their life that they're involved with, their parents, grandparents, aunts and uncles, and so forth. The reason I get people to date it is because there's two things that are non-negotiable. One is time, and the other is aging. Can't stop it. But nobody thinks about that. They don't think 3 years out until they really look at it. And organically, when you look 3 to 5 years out, we see some lifestyle changes coming, right? So for me, for example, when I stepped into Arbonne, I was pregnant with Laurel and my son was 2. And I desperately wanted to quit my job and stay home. And what I wanted was to get to a certain place in my business, income-wise, before they were starting school so that I could help pay for private schooling we wanted to put them in, right? So you see where I'm going with the dates, and it's what I said earlier around it's the game changer, because most people will put beautiful vision boards together, great pictures, maybe say, I'm hoping this will happen, I'm trying, that's happening. But the difference with what I do is get people to really look at the non-negotiables and put some target dates on things. That determines what you can really focus on for the upcoming year, for 2020, right? So if I wanted, let's say, a beach house, which I've always wanted, and I want it by the end of this year, how do I put a date on that? And then if I know what it's going to take to get the beach house, then that helps me with inside my business know what I need to do to create that income to make it happen.
Mm-hmm. You know what I love about that, and just so many conversations are rushing back to me with friends who were at that point of wanting to leave their full-time job, leap into their business, which they already had established. But what stops a lot of people is the fear. So they never sit down with pen to paper to say, well, how much income would my business need to generate? And if I needed that income, then how many customers would that break down into? And when we look at the numbers, we often realize it's more achievable, or at least we start to see a pathway to achieving these things. But I think what stops a lot of people, and even myself in the past from doing this, is then I'm responsible for taking the action. Is that what you found too? I'm like laughing at myself as you're saying this. Mm-hmm.
I did a workshop last Friday and I had them write their vision out. So when I actually physically do that and facilitate it, I leave an hour for them to write this 3-year letter. And after they write it, we talk about what's the chatter going on in your head. And 100%, every single one of them say, now I have to be held accountable.
Yeah.
And now I really have to start taking the baby steps. But the thing is, Lindsay, the fear never goes away. And I think people are waiting for the fear to go away, that they can show up, courageous and confident. And it's backwards thinking. We have to write a vision that is so powerful, it pulls us to want to start taking those baby steps, regardless of the fear. What I wanted raising Cole and Laurel was bigger than all the obstacles that I hit along the way. And there was a lot of obstacles. There were days that I wanted to quit so bad, but what I wanted for them and for us was bigger. So that's another big with a big benefit of having that written vision is I've said this many times, it becomes the anchor in all the storms of your life, that no matter what's going on, you will stay anchored in that vision and you'll keep going and pushing through it. So yeah, the fear's never going to go away.
Yeah. Oh, I don't think we could ever hear that too many times and from too many people, because that is oftentimes the biggest roadblock to people then taking what they wrote on that vision letter and putting it into action. So
Right.
how do you help people get into action quickly and into action around those baby steps once they have that pen to paper and have fleshed out their, let's just even say 3-year vision for where people want to be if they're listening to this and they say, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to write that letter and carve out the time by 2023. Crazy to say that.
Yeah.
Then what?
Yeah.
Then what do I do on January 2nd?
Yeah. Baby steps. So then you've got to reverse engineer it of, okay, what's the 1-year plan? Then take 1 year to 6 months. And then take 6 months into 90-day increments, which the magic for running any business is in 90-day increments. So you break the 90-day increment so you know what you're going to do in quarter 1, Lindsay, right? If you've got a target for Q1 that feeds into the bigger vision, it's a much smaller number to deal with. Yeah. Then you can break that down into monthly and weekly goals. And so what it comes down to is every single day, you know exactly intentionally what 2 or 3 things are the most important things that are going to move you forward. Right? So I think so many people look at the 3 years and they get overwhelmed, especially if they really dream big and they're nowhere near what that vision looks like right now circumstantially. But the magic is in just taking the baby steps every day. Right? So you just take a baby step. Maybe it's in your fitness. Maybe, you want to run a marathon at the end of the year. Okay. Start walking around the block. Do that for 2 weeks and then increase it to running a mile. It's called The Compound Effect, a really good book by Darren Hardy, by the way, on how you do consistently things every day, not in big chunks and then nothing.
So this is what I'm going to kind of cap off this vision piece and you just giving us a little glimpse into how magnificent you are at facilitating this with others. One of the things I know that's made the biggest difference between all of those vision boards that I made in the past or vision letters that I wrote and now actually living so many of the things that I at one time put on a vision board is I had to create radical, super uncomfortable accountability for myself.
Yes.
Like in ways that made me want to puke because I was so out of my comfort zone. So how important is that in the work that you've done? How does accountability play in to what you've seen in terms of the people who execute and those that don't?
There's lots of different ways I hold myself accountable. One, Laurel and I work together and she knows the plan. I hire mentors every single year. I've had a coach that I invest in. And I invest in coaches that are already where I want to be. And I invest in them first before the money comes.
Yep.
Another thing people do backwards. I, like you, know that when I want to achieve something, I tell people. And then I get myself in a group of people who are also doing things very courageously, because when you lock arms with other people who are pushing through the fear, they're investing in themselves. I tell Laura all the time, get around people that are always positive. They're moving forward in their life. Their mindset is like yours. Because if you're around people that they're okay with being okay, and no judgment against these people, they're just not going to help you get there.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, a lot of them want to keep you right where they're at.
Yeah.
Always.
Yes.
So is that something you've started to take on in your life, Laurel? Have you seen the impact of that?
I definitely have. I think there is a lot of power in being uncomfortable. And I'm glad you brought that up, because I was thinking about that as my mom was talking about when people write those letters, as I can I've sat in my mom's workshop multiple times. You can kind of physically see people starting to move and like squirm a little bit because they're starting to feel very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But I think it's hard for people to get outside of that. But kind of going back to her talking about being around those right people too, I think that is something I'm shifting towards a lot in my life. I have had great opportunities this last year that I've been able to be a part of some different things, but it's very interesting how I feel when I'm around certain people versus others, and how many times I've been told you do too much, or you just work all the time, or, you know, and in my mind, I'm like, I feel like this is what's getting me towards that next level. And I think when you're around those people that don't quite get it is when you start hearing those kind of things, which to me, it's kind of like, okay, maybe I'm doing something right because I'm kind of pushing past that norm and that uncomfortable spot, but not everyone's going to get it. So it's definitely something I'm shifting towards a lot more, of being around very positive and optimistic people that do have that vision and that work ethic for sure.
Yeah. And I wish that was something I would have embodied a lot earlier in life and been able to see the impact of wanting to please everyone else or meet other people's expectations.
Right.
It was just exhausting.
Yeah,
Absolutely
it is.
Exhausting.
Yeah. And I think what's hard about it too is, I'm only 3 years removed from college, is that you already get forced into not being around your friends as often, or not being in the same cities as a lot of those people. And so you don't want to lose more of that. And so I think that also can hold people back my age, of not wanting to be even more different, because you're still trying to like have that group or find that little group. And that can be hard in that situation too, of people feeling already a little bit different and making them feel a little bit more lonely. And so that can be tricky early on into the whole work world.
Yeah. I loved one of the things in the book that I thought was so relatable to everyone in this audience who listens to our podcast. You talked about, as you were going through your grieving process, having to identify the people who are your super safe people.
Yeah.
And I thought, gosh, how relevant is that to having those people who are super safe to share your big dreams with? The ones who may not even get it, but they're always going to be like, I believe in you.
Yeah.
Do you want to share, Carey, I can't remember if this relates exactly. I'm sort of putting you on the spot, but I remember so vividly our first conversation, and you had this analogy of a theater.
Yes.
And seeing, does that relate to tie back to this? Because that's how I have it cemented in my memory. And either way, I would love for you to share it, because I just remember I don't remember the entire way you set it up, but I remember the impact. And I think that's such a good tie-in to what we're talking about here.
Yeah. So when I do my workshops and I share all the reasons why vision is so important, one of them is that it helps you put boundaries around your time, your money, and most especially the people you spend it with. And when I do this in a stretch of time, I talk more about people, because it's the one thing, Lindsay, that after I've done it with people in the workshops and my events, the one thing I hear the most about later, people come back to me and go, yeah, that people thing, that front row thing changed my life. And so what I tell people is just to think about them standing on a stage and looking out into the audience, and there's rows of seats, right? And let's say there's 10 seats in every row. You have people in your life that are the 9s and 10s. These are the people that believe in you. They got your vision. They know you're going to get there. They remind you who you are on the days you want to quit. They are the ones that just feel like you can do anything, 9s and 10s. A big group of people are in the middle section of the numbers, and they're people that, the conversation is great. There's nothing up or down. It's just cordial, right? And then you've got the people who are like the 5s and below, that are the ones who want to just kind of take you down a notch. The 1s and 2s literally want to suck the life right out of you and steal your dreams. And so what we have to do is start identifying who we are spending the most amount of time with. And the only people that should be in the front row of your life, that get not only your time, but they also, you let them into your heart. You take their advice and you share stuff because you know they're safe, are the 9s and 10s. So when I do that with people, a lot of people, I can see them go, wow, I have some people in the wrong rows and I need to move some people from the front row back. most especially what a lot of the entrepreneurs that I work with see is that they need more 9s and 10s in the front row to take them to the next level in their business.
Yes.
They've got some empty seats they need to fill, right?
Mm.
So for Laurel and I, in our analogy in the book, when we lost my husband and son, so much happened around that, especially with how people dealt with she and I through this situation, that we soon had to put boundaries up around us,
Mm-hmm.
both physically and emotionally, because people do what people are going to do, not knowing what they're doing and what they're saying. And so we've had to really, our little circle of people that get our hearts and our time are few. They're this really super safe. They have walked us through a lot and continue to walk with us no matter what.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I do want to, as we start to wrap this up, I want to just allow you to share a little bit about the book, where people can find it. I wanted to say, just reading it as someone who has never been in your shoes,
Mm-hmm.
I number one saw just the hope that it can give for someone who is in a similar situation or just struggling with how to deal with those feelings. But what I took away from it as someone in my shoes is a glimpse into how to support someone in my life
Right.
who is walking through a trauma of any kind, and seeing how different your perspectives were, realizing that no two people even process trauma the same or grieve the same. It was really beautiful the way that you wrote it. I know it's going to make a big impact. So do you want to share a little bit about where to find it? And I'd also just love to hear what your hope is for those who read it.
So the book is on Amazon. It's called Keep Looking Up. And it's also an ebook. And Laurel and I are going to be recording an Audible very, very soon. Audible version. We've been asked several times to do that. So it is available there. Our hope for the book, and Laurel can expand on this, was just what you said, Lindsay, that we became very aware that people had no idea what was going on behind the scenes for us and how to deal with us. So a lot of people didn't at all. And a lot of people started asking she and I, I've got somebody who's going through something and I don't know how to help them. What do I do? And so I'm glad you got that perspective. So.
Yeah, that was a big piece that we really wanted to focus on, because we've been in that situation. Even after going through our own loss, there are still times that we're like, okay, we need to figure out how this person wants us to go about it. That was a big thing that I'm sure you picked up on, that we talk a lot about mirroring somebody else's grief. And so we wanted to be able to give that perspective of, even if you're reading the book and haven't experienced tragic loss or anything like that, that you can be that resource. So we're glad that you picked that up for sure, because it was kind of a twofold part to the book. So our biggest hope is definitely offering hope for people struggling, but also for those that are wanting to help and to not feel that feeling of helplessness.
Right. And I would say, on top of, Carey, what you shared earlier about the inevitable things in life that we have no control over, which is, getting older, aging, is that we might go through or have to walk with someone we love through a difficult situation. So I truly I'm so grateful to you both for sharing your story and writing the book in the way you did. And I'm even more grateful that I read it before I quote unquote needed to, if that makes sense. I actually feel so much more equipped just in my heart to be with whatever the rest of my journey might hold, and not have that fear around how would that look, or how would I support someone that I love. So just truly, from the bottom of my heart, so much gratitude for you both for sharing your story in the way that you did. And I would love to end with a question that I ask at the end of every interview. This will be really fun to hear both of your different perspectives, because you both really relate to completely different types of people, walks of life. And as you know, this community is all about helping women get out of their own way and into action around those things that have been placed on their heart that they feel called to pursue, even if they're just waking up to what those things are. So my question for you both, and I'll have Laurel start on this one. Is
Okay.
if you just had one message to share with a woman who is, in your shoes, in your demographic, who is starting to wake up to the fact that she has choices, what would your message of encouragement be to her to just inspire her to take that next step?
I guess there's a lot of things I could say. I know. I'm like, well, which one do I even pick? I guess this is actually something my mom continually reminds me of, but I think is something very, very important for people my age, is to live in faith and not in fear. I myself am really working on that big time, but also remembering that this is the best time to take those chances. Just like we keep talking about, that it's inevitable that we're going to age and that there's truly nothing you can lose by trying it. The most successful times of my life so far have been when I have stepped into that fear and been so uncomfortable. And that feeling is so, so worth it, because what comes after being fearful is way better than anything that you can explain. So that would be my best
Amen,
advice.
sister. I love that. Carey, what about you?
The best piece of advice that I could give people my age? Is that what you're asking?
You could really speak to, obviously you work with a lot of different women, a lot of different entrepreneurs, but for that person who is hearing this today and just needs that one little piece of wisdom to take the next step in creating their dream life and the vision that they can see for themselves.
Yeah. All right. Well, here's the newest thing that I've been sharing a lot, and you're going to be hearing more about this over the next year, that I've started pointing out, is every time you shrink, you give the people you love the permission to shrink too. So specifically, I've been talking a lot to moms and saying, okay, here's the thing. You may be stuck and you right now are not stepping past your own fear because you don't feel like you're worth it or that you deserve it. But the problem with that is that you right now have other people who are watching you that are needing to step out into and through their own fear. And the very people they're looking to are you. And so if they're seeing you deciding, you know what, it's done. It's no big deal. I didn't really need to go after that dream anyway. I'm too this, I'm too that, I'm too old. It's too late. I don't have the time or money. When they have to face those decisions, they're going to go, you know what? They didn't do it, so why should I have to? And that, I think, should be the driving force for all of us right now, is that every time you choose to shrink, the people who are watching you, whether they're kids or your own parents or whatever, we're giving each other the allowance to all stay stuck together. And what we need right now are more people that are being courageous and being inspirations for each other. And if that doesn't fire you up, I don't know what will, because that's what kept me going. Like I said, all those years that I wanted to quit with Cole and Laurel, I couldn't do it because I knew they were watching.
So good. And I think no matter if we're raising tiny humans or not, that is so true. There are people in our lives who are watching.
And especially for the people in your community, Lindsay, the ones that you're pulling together. If they're really showing up for each other and inspiring each other, it means they're breaking through their own fears and being courageous. And that's what a great piece of being in a community can do for you.
Agreed. So where can people learn more about you if they want to dive deeper on this whole topic of vision and be a part of what you're creating?
Yeah, just my website, careyconley.com. It's a great place to go. You can find out where I'm speaking, workshops I'm doing, where to find our books, the whole thing.
Great. And we'll make sure to link all of that in the show notes. Thank you so much this was just too much fun. I feel like now I'm sort of like an associate family member now. Yeah. So we'll get there. But truly, I appreciate you both so much. And this was just so much fun and can't wait to connect in person sometime soon.
We appreciate you for helping us.
Thank you.